So cool. Thank you, Michelle. When we sent out the invitation, oops, I lost the camera. I just see Rye. Okay, that's okay. I think that's what's supposed to happen. So when we sent out the invitation for this, I want to give you, there were a few points that I made about sleep and how it's applied to the Rye approach. So sleep is a developmental skill, and it's a developmental skill that 100% of babies and children can learn at different stages of development. And it actually involves the gross motor skill of falling. So that the falling that our infants, when they learn how to crawl, when they start learning how to stand and cruise, that sensation of falling is something that they have to incorporate into their sleep repertoire. So they learn pretty quickly. Infants are very smart. They learn quickly. They learn as they fall to sleep that the mattress catches them 100% of the time. So I received some questions earlier, and I'm going to be answering these kind of in a broader context around sleep and falling. When we're nursing and rocking and doing all of these things we do to put our babies to sleep, we're fixing that sensation of falling. So that's what they have to learn in order to become skilled and then masterful sleepers. They have to learn the sensation of falling. Sleep naturally brings up emotions of vulnerability at night. And these emotions, our grown-up brain really wants to get back to sleep. We're supporting our child in learning this skill, and it becomes very interruptive. So we feel really vulnerable at night. And every day, moms tell me on the phone, I know I should really be doing blank, but instead I wake up, I go in, I bring them into bed, I fix the falling because I'm exhausted and I want to go back to sleep. And it's exactly, that is our vulnerability in the night, and it's why we end up fixing sleep for our children, and also why we end up, I call them sleep crutches. Crutches are a beautiful, wonderful thing, but when we don't need them anymore, what happens is, just like if we have an ankle that's sprained, if we use crutches, when the ankle's healed, if we continue to use the crutches, the muscle actually atrophies. And so infants, to learn this skill, they have to learn it first, then practice it. And sleep happens just like development. It's not a linear process. So one of the difficulties that I do is I provide a linear process for an event that there's nothing linear about development. It doesn't go like that, really. It looks more like this. If we were to track all development, there are natural regressions. There's a lot of talk in the literature about sleep regressions. What I like to focus on are the leaps of development and how to work with the leaps and usher our children through to learning the skill of falling and re-falling to sleep. What I like to do, and this is also from the Rye perspective, is we involve the child in the process. I notice in one of the questions, mom says, I talk to my child. You know, this is what we do from birth with our infants in Rye. We talk to them, we tell them what's gonna happen next. And it's the same with sleep. We wanna make sure to present it to them in a way that they can understand. And that's through repetitive physical action. That's how children learn. That's how they learn development, through repeating the physical actions. So I like the definition of habit that I came across years ago from a teacher. And habit is something we get better at. So as whatever your child has learned as far as the condition that puts them to sleep, that's what they expect all night long, and it becomes a habit. So to generally, what I'm working with families on is the change of habit, how to change habit. And when it comes to changing habit, we have to look at the ritual that precedes habit. Ritual is a really important part of this process. And children respond to ritual, even young babies, pre-verbal babies, because the ritual, we talk about this a lot in RIE, the ritual and the routine of the day. This is what shows our infants by doing, by a physical activity, repeating the physical process. This is how they learn. So that, I wanted to touch on that as well. We also want to present sleep as children grow, and especially in toddlerhood. I'm going to have a lot of toddler questions. The newborn phase is about bonding. It's about the attachment. And so naturally, we're going to fix more sleep when our babies are newborns, because we're feeding in the night, we're feeding throughout the night. And the sleep-wake cycle is kind of enmeshed with the caregiving routine in the night and the day for naps for our newborns. But as they come into toddlerhood, how we prepare the toddler is really key. And we want to show them what to expect as far as sleep goes. So toddlerhood is where we present sleep as health, safety. It's because toddlers know we're in charge of health and safety, and sleep is definitely a health and safety issue. It's kind of it's one of the fundamental cornerstones of our well-being and our mental health. I had a dad the other day on the phone tell me, now I know why this is part of the Geneva Convention as a form of torture, you know, just being awakened all night. It is key for our mental and emotional health. So when we're preparing the toddler, we want to present it in this very loving way. We want to endear them to the process so that they internalize the feeling that sleep is an act of self-love. Back in my when I was getting my associateship in RIE, Harry Grebler was one of my mentors. And I remember we would have discussions about sleep, and she wanted to call it the beauty of sleep. We want to present sleep to our children as something that's beautiful, something that's lovely, and really endear them to this process. So I'll be talking a lot about ways we can do that. And because we want them to grow into young people, young children, young adults who care for the self around sleep. And I've seen this over the years of working with sleep, that children who are allowed to learn sleep is the skill, and we present it to them as a loving act, that they internalize it, and they take care of themselves around sleep. It's crucial for our well-being and our immune systems and our mental health, our sanity, as I said. And one of the advantages right now of shelter in, I'm having more success on naps than I think I ever have in the history of compassionate sleep solutions. Naps are the one area they're harder. They take longer because the child, especially around 8-9 months, when gross motor, again, we're going to relate it back to gross motor skills, when our infants start crawling out into the world, right? The bond and the attachment is so strong that they feel safe and secure to crawl out and explore their world. Their curiosity and their creativity is taking hold, and they're going out into the world. When this happens is a really great time to start working on sleep. And as they crawl, they're learning how to fall. Naps are harder though, because it's a different chemical brain state during the day. And it's really hard to get parents to stay home and really work on naps in the sleep place. So a lot of my clients say, you know, we just did naps however. We did them in cars, we did them in strollers, we just did our naps that way, and it didn't disrupt night sleep. So that's how we did it. But during the shelter in time, I'm really encouraging parents to use this time to work on creating a dependable, predictable routine around the naps of the day. So I think I'm going to dive into answering a couple of questions that came in earlier. And as usual, when people ask questions, I usually need to ask at least 5 questions to expand on it. So I'm going to try to answer these questions in a bigger context around sleep. And I'm hoping that the people who wrote in, that you get your answers and that I cover a lot of people out there. So someone has a 13-month-old who's skipping her second afternoon nap on and off since she was 10 months old. And it looks like you're doing everything right. She refuses to even fall asleep and stays awake playing in her crib for over an hour. We keep getting advice that we should drop a nap, but your gut says she still really needs 2 naps. And when we have tried to only do 1 nap, she never sleeps for longer than an hour and 15, and after a few days is so exhausted they just get into this cycle of exhaustion. Now, luckily, her night sleep is staying solid. This is good. And you are putting her down sleepy but awake, and you're doing everything right. What I would recommend is, I would need to have more information, but at 13 months old, I'm wondering if that first nap needs to happen a little later. So maybe 3.5 hours after wake up, we start to play with the time awake between naps and start to lengthen that a little bit. Because if she's continually staying up for an hour, maybe she's not tired and it's time to put that nap a little later. But you're right, really the transition to 1 nap happens between 15 to 18 months. And I've noticed over the years, the earlier children transition to 1 nap, the longer the transition takes. So we can lead our babies to the bed, but we can't make them sleep. What I would recommend in your case is talking to her about it in the context of maybe her lovey or a story or a very simple play scenario that you talk to her about. The puppy or the kitten is time to nap, and the puppy lays down and naps every day. So the preparation that I do with story and play, that's a longer conversation. But I would work with her on endearing her to the process and understanding that every day she goes in and has her nap, but I would try that nap a little later. And that means your second nap is probably going to fall a little later in the day. But if she's truly dropping that 1 nap, I would work with you on how to consolidate it into 1 nap. And that's going to take probably 3 or 4 months. But you would want to talk to her about it and prepare her every day and tell her, this is in you go at this time every day for nap, and out you come after. You're doing great. Really, the way we get naps is we hold the time of the nap. So if you know she can sleep for an hour and a half, you hold that time in the space of the crib, and you prepare her ahead of time, telling her, this is when you nap, and I come get you after nap. And we prepare them in a story and play scenario. The next question is a 4-month-old. She'd like to train or work with her baby. I don't really call it sleep training. I like sleep learning. We're not really training them, but this question is asking how to get a 4-month-old to bridge sleep cycles at night and encourage self-soothing. We're still having frequent night wakings and breastfeedings. It's the only thing that soothes her back to sleep, and I'd like her to be able to fall back asleep without nursing. So this is the great thing. Initially, for her naps and night, she's falling at the onset. So that's the first period that we work on, falling at the onset of sleep. What I would recommend is working on creating a focal feed. And the focal feed was not my brilliant idea. It came out of research. When babies can fall asleep and re-fall asleep, they tend to focalize their feedings at pretty predictable times in the night. So a 4-month-old, generally a 4-month-old is capable of sleeping through the night with 2 focal feeds. So how I work with this age baby, because this is a new baby, this is still considered the newborn phase, and continue to hold on to that falling at the onset that she's doing, is falling asleep. continue to do that, because over time, she's going to be able to bridge those sleep cycles. Now, I don't know where this baby is sleeping. I would need to know where she's sleeping. This is a time to move the baby to her own bassinet. So if she's in her, she or he is in her own bassinet, she, in her own bassinet, that little bit of separateness can help to reduce feedings, because she probably doesn't need that many feedings in the night. And then I recommend using alternate soothing methods. So we push that first feeding the infant right before we put them to sleep, but putting them down sleepy but awake, allow her to fall asleep. And then if she wakes an hour or two after that, you want to start to push that first feeding as close to midnight as possible, and use alternate soothing methods. Your voice, your touch can pick her up, hold her, sway her, use alternate soothing methods so that she can get used to another way of falling asleep other than having your breast in her mouth. So this is a good time to move newborns to their own place to sleep. You can still co-sleep, but I don't know if she's in bed with you or not. So that would be my recommendation for a 4-month-old. They can generally go with 2 feedings in the night and using alternate soothing methods to coax her back to sleep and allow her to do a little bit of struggle. And we'll talk about that more as we go on. The struggle in the cry, what that sounds like versus suffering. So learning to discern the cries of struggle and allowing a little bit of struggle, and learning what sounds like suffering or too much for your child. And you get to make that choice. But I want to give you all a little exercise that's going to help you in discerning that. So here's another one, a 15-month-old. She can only get to sleep by nursing or riding in the car or stroller. We have tried to do sleep training a little bit, but he cries and cries immediately upon being put down. Any suggestions? Yes. Do I have to wean him first? So at 15 months old, this is what 15-month-old toddlers are capable of. They're capable of sleeping through without food in the night. And it really helps stabilize sleep, because I take it your 15-month-old is now having solid foods. So what I've learned about sleep, and this is the newest area of study around sleep, that the rest and digest system is intricately linked to the circadian rhythms. Once toddlers, young children, start taking in solid food, really their digestion, the overriding need is to rest the digestion at night. Now, breast milk is the easiest digestible food. That's not the concern. What it is at this age, the reason why his sleep is so disturbed is because he's using the breast as a sleep crutch to get back to sleep. So there isn't an authentic need for food. And this is what I call mommy human pacifier. And so yes, weaning would really help that, night weaning. Now you can nurse during the day as long as you want to nurse, but definitely weaning at night would help this. Also, riding in the car and stroller, motion sleep is not quality sleep. It's an altered state. And so for the best sleep, developmentally at this age, toddlers are capable of deeper sleep. They really need to be resting on a flat, still surface. So at 15 months, we can really prepare toddlers, again, with a story in play scenario that we explain to the child. This is kind of something I adapted from Dan Siegel's work, that children process their feelings, their emotions, and their learning through play, story, and language, because receptive language at 15 months is keen enough. He understands his physical environment, and the emotional environment by the tone of the language and learning enough words to present the new way of sleep in a story and play scenario with a lovey, with an item. Someone asked in the Q&A, do I recommend, it was the first question, so I'm going to answer this one as I answer the question I was just answering. Ooh, there are a lot of questions. And it was about a lovey. I can't find it now. Where is it? Do I recommend?
I can read it. I can read it for you.
Thank you, do.
Yes. So it was, do you recommend loveys or attachment objects? And if so, at what age do you recommend introducing them and how?
Yes. The lovey, the transitional object, it's a really interesting story. It was discovered in attachment theory research. The original attachment theorist, D.W. Winnicott, talked about it, and a couple of others. I'm missing their names right now. The importance of this little object changes over the child's development. At first, the lovey is literally something to cling to while the child falls. They cling to the lovey. At about 8, 9 months old, it has a little more significance. It becomes a visual cue and a reminder of our love for them. So the way to endear them to the lovey is love on the lovey. We have to love on the lovey. In a sense, we're infusing this item with relationship. Now, as toddlers, as our children grow and become toddlers, so this is what I was relating this to this 15-month-old, we start to infuse it with a little story, with a story about sleep, and the child can have their own sleep story. And this gets more elaborate as children get older, but to start out with, we just want to endear them to the lovey. We bring it into the ritual. It's more than just bringing it into the nighttime ritual, into the breastfeeding relationship and having the child hold it with our smell. It's a little more than that. They're so relational. And so we relate to this item, we sing to it, we make up a little story, we talk to it, we kiss it goodnight. And as the child grows, the toy is an extension of the child, and it's how they're learning how to learn. And they can soothe themselves through soothing and doing a play scenario of soothing and with this item. And that usually happens when you notice your child is starting to do nurturing play. In their play life during the day, they're starting to feed their stuffies or feed a baby doll. That's a time where we can bring a beloved item that the child then picks into the sleep scenario, and we create a sleep story. And it's a way of endearing the child to the process, but it's also a way of reiterating to the child that they are safe and secure, that their safety and security isn't something we have to come in all night long and reinvent that wheel for them, but we can give them items that suggest you're safe, you're secure. And I like animals. I like animals because we love to anthropomorphize animals in storybooks. And they sleep in caves and dens and nests, and it has this really cozy feeling of looking at a sleeping puppy or a sleeping kitten. So that's what I would recommend for the 15-month-old. And weaning him off of nursing, rocking, driving in the car, and the stroller. It's a weaning process, just like we wean them off of the breast when they no longer need the milk for nutrition and a food need. We wean them off. So, and then I have one more question here about a 12-month-old. Nurses to sleep and his co-slept all the time, and mom loves that. We do. That's a great thing. I tell parents that co-sleeping is a beautiful, wonderful thing under 3 conditions. The first one is that it's safe. That's easy. That's an easy fix. Everyone who comes to me who's co-sleeping, bed sharing. There are 2 forms of co-sleeping. There's bed sharing, and then there's room sharing. So let's talk about bed sharing first, because this is a bed share. all those warm fuzzies and the cuddling, it feels great. So making it safe is the first deal about co-sleeping. The second one is that everybody wants everybody there. So that means I only recommend co-sleeping if you really are committed to that and want to. A lot of us end up doing unintentional co-sleeping. And then we're frustrated and irritated, but we're doing it because we don't know what else to do. And the child feels that underlying emotional angst. So everybody wants everybody there. And that includes dad or your partner also wants everybody there. So that's something, as long as everybody wants everybody there, the emotional environment is a healthy co-sleeping environment. Oh, we welcome you in. We want you here. The third area is where co-sleeping generally falls apart, and it's where co-sleeping works if everybody's getting the sleep they need. And that's where it kind of unravels. I call it the idealization of something. The idealization of something is when the idea of it is better than the reality. So what happens in bed sharing is the child is in this wake sleep cycle because we're fixing their sleep all night, and we have to be awake in order to fix their sleep, and it becomes really disruptive. So a 12-month-old is probably having solid foods, and I would recommend weaning down these feedings, because it looks like what's happening is that she's using the breast as comfort to get back to sleep. So yeah. So during, and this is a stressful time. This is a really stressful time, and some people are really ready to take on sleep and regulate sleep in their homes, because we're finding that during a stressful time, we really need our sleep. Our emotional well-being starts to unravel. And for some people, it's too much to take on during this time. So this is there's more to it. It's a very long question. So all of the waking in the night, and this is what you're going to have to confront, is crying. So I do want to talk a little more about crying. Do we need to go on to questions, or should I talk a little bit about crying right now?
I think we could do a little bit about crying, and then yes, we have quite a few questions to kind of walk through. And one of them is also, we have a couple from caregivers in a caregiving setting, or not the parents. So
Okay.
we want to get to that.
Okay.
So go ahead and just let me know.
Crying is the number, I'd say that's the top concern of parents. And cry it out is one approach. That's one extreme of, we put the child in their space and we white knuckle it in the other room, and we listen at certain timed intervals and hope they fall asleep, and it's torture. What I recommend is preparation. Is first of all, we're prepared. We prepare the child with a physical walkthrough, dress rehearsal, and show them what's happening. If they're no longer sleeping in bed with us, pardon me, I recommend having one last night of doing sleep the current way that you no longer want to be doing. I had a family a couple of weeks ago with a toddler who did their last night, and the mother woke up and looked at her child and said, "I am so happy that was the last night." And her toddler looked up at her and said, "Me too, that was horrible." So it's just not working, right? And so we tell our child, "This isn't working, sweetie. Let's have one last night, really celebrate it. If we did co-sleeping and bed sharing, this was beautiful, wonderful thing. Now you're ready to go to your own nest. This is your own space." We create sanctuaries for our sleep, these beautiful environments. Our bedroom is a sanctuary. Really, the only thing grown-ups should be doing in a bedroom is sleeping and making love. That is just this beautiful sanctuary for these human, wonderful things we do, right? The bedroom. And then we create these beautiful nurseries for our children where they sleep and they play and they have this wonderful, holding, loving environment. We trust what we've built, that the child can understand the physical environment, and we show them. And we show them, we prepare them ahead of time. We do a walkthrough. We tell them what our loving reassurance is going to look like. So when it comes to the cry, what I do, and it's a longer process of helping parents understand the self-soothing mechanism. So I'm going to give you a mini lesson on the self-soothing mechanism. It comes online in the brain, and it comes to stability at around 6 months old. So as far as allowing infants to struggle around sleep, that's like 5, 6 months old. There are things that we can accomplish with a 4-month-old, but we're not going to let a 4-month-old struggle too much to learn the beauty of sleep, because their self-soothing mechanism isn't stable yet. So once it's stable, and then it doesn't finish developing till about 3 years old. But even after 3, if our child needs us in the night, if they're scared, if they're sick, or something, we're going to respond. So it's a very responsive approach. The cry, when the self-soothing mechanism is activated in the brain, the cry has a certain sound to it. I call it cycling. And so what I teach, and like I said, this is a deeper conversation of the subtleties of that cry, that you can discern what is struggle. And a lot of you already know this. You can tell when your child is struggling. Now, if they're crying and it sounds just so intense that there's no break in the cry except to take a breath and to keep on crying, you go to your child, but you've prepared them ahead of time. You go and you offer what I call alternate soothing methods. You can pick them up, you can hold them, put them back down when they're calm. You can sit by their crib and be present. It's a high presence and low engagement. So we're very present. There's a method out there that recommends we don't look in their eyes. That's getting close to the still face experiments, which are, don't even look at those on YouTube. There are plenty of videos of the still face experiments. What happens if a child is not getting a response from a parent, if their face is still and they're looking away and not engaging, but sitting there, it makes the child desperate to elicit a response. So we go and we connect. We connect with our voice, our touch, our eyes, our bodies. We want to pick them up. And when we do, we want to make sure that we are self-regulated. That is the biggest piece. And that's a new piece in attachment that's coming out, that our children are only learning in part how to soothe themselves by how we care for them and co-regulate and soothe them. The other soothing that we do, how they're really learning is watching us self-soothe, watching us self-regulate. I always quote Janet Lansbury, my dear colleague Janet, that we are the emotional anchor for the child. So when we go down the path of allowing our children to learn this falling as applied to sleep, we want to make sure that we are self-regulated as we go in. So when they're crying, that we're not swept away in a narrative that is telling us, oh my God, I'm torturing him. This is abandonment, it's neglect, it's trauma. If we get swept away in that narrative, we're not present for a child who is probably just tired, frustrated, irritated, disappointed that they're not getting what they used to get in order to sleep. And we're showing them something new. They're frustrated, they're learning a new skill. And so we want to make sure we're really self-regulated. But you can hear the cries. There's a cycle in the cries. If they go up and down, have crescendos and decrescendos, that is struggling. And that's the self-soothing mechanism is activated, and we can give that 5 minutes, just 5 more minutes. We keep adding on a little time waiting and seeing, or we can pull up a chair and sit next to them and be present and hold a loving space of, I hear you, I see you, I know this is hard, and we can do this together. It's hard. Just like we tell our children when they want another popsicle, I know you want another one tomorrow. I know you want to come out of the crib after a good night's sleep. So that's how we're reporting to them on the crying. So let's go to some questions. We'll probably talk more.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So, this appears to be from a caregiver
Okay.
that is not a parent. Occasionally, parents ask us not to let their child go to sleep at nap time so that they will go to sleep at night. I'm a real sleep advocate, and I'm wondering if very young children are getting enough sleep.
No, they're not. So this is an interesting little piece of data. When I started doing this 17 years ago, children were getting about an hour less sleep than they were 30 years ago. And that, unfortunately, that number has gone up. And the number one contributor to that is parental guilt. Parents are working longer and harder hours. They want to spend time with their children. So children are having later sleep times. They're going to bed too late, and they're missing out on naps because parents think that, oh, if they sleep during the day, they're not going to be tired at night. But it's not, that's not how sleep works in the young child. Sleep in the young child is over a 24-hour period, and their bodies need rest and sleep during the day. Now, that number does vary. For example, like the 13-month-old I was talking about sooner, the first question that I had about the 13-month-old, it looks like you're doing everything right. You can't make her sleep. But what I would say is bring up the bedtime. I don't know what time her bedtime is. It's really early for these children. So if you're a nanny and a caregiver, I would urge them, if you notice that their child is really tired, that to allow them to nap during the day, and then they can have a little more time hanging out with their child at night. But even with a good nap, children are ready for bed by 7. Sometimes, like this 13-month-old who's having a trouble napping, that child may be ready to go to sleep by 6:30. I remember in RI classes, some mine were, and some of the children in RI classes were going to sleep for the night at 5:30, and sleeping till 6:30 and having naps. So where children fall as far as how much each individual child needs in that spectrum, we find out, but most children need naps till past 3 years old. Like it's a real trend to drop naps at 2. It's way too young. And if someone does, that bedtime has to get really early, like at least 6. And then parents come home from work and they have no time with their child. So I would encourage them to, if you notice that child's tired, because overtired children are cranky, they cry more. It's really hard, and we don't want them to habituate into crashing, just like pushing themselves until they crash. That's not a healthy habit. The longer term effect, when people come to me with toddlers and infants, I'm not really worried about the brain development of that child. It becomes an issue if they've habituated to not enough sleep when they get in school and start learning the deeper concepts of maths and sciences, which many would say are happening too early in children anyway. If that brain is sleep deprived, it struggles. The brain struggles. That child will struggle. And the longer term effects of children who've habituated to not enough sleep, when they get to college, it's a disaster. But we're not at college yet. We're talking about 0 to 3 or 4, right? But you want them to habituate to good enough sleep at this age for the long term.
So we have a question also about a pacifier. What is the best time to get rid of a pacifier as a comfort for sleep? What to do if a 2-year-old is having a hard time falling asleep without one, and then also doesn't go back to sleep without one? Wakes up in the middle of the night and wants it.
The passy, I just talked to a client today about the passy. I don't judge. Passy. I do have a little program. I call it Passy Rehab. It's never a good time to go to rehab. I've relaxed about the passy over the years, right? In Rye, we don't really encourage pacifiers. It's what it does. It creates a need where there is not really a need. Now, some infants come into the world and we call them sucky babies. They just want to suck for comfort. And, if those babies have pacifiers, it's okay. What I've found, though, is that over time, the pacifier starts to interrupt more than it helps. At 2 years old, what I do is a little ritual, and we involve the child in the process. I've met families, worked with families whose child initiated, like heard about the Passy Fairy or something, or we just give them a realistic, it's time to go to the next stage. That we have decided as your parents that you don't need the Passy anymore. And so you gather all the Passys, you bless the Passys, you say, thank you, Passys, it was wonderful. And you put them in a box and send them to the children who need them. Or some children my son loved the garbage can because he loved garbage trucks, and his way of putting his bottles in his Easter basket and dumping them in the garbage truck so the garbage truck could come get them, that was fascinating and wonderful for him. So we put him in his Easter basket and we created a little ritual. We took pictures of the last bottles of the day. We did a little photojournalistic essay of the bottles, and he participated in it. And my daughter, she wasn't really that into bottles, so she participated in it too. And over the years, I've created with families, all of these personalized ways that the child was interested in, something that the child's interested in, that we gather the Passys, we say goodbye, we thank them, and we don't need them. Now, what happens when the pacifier is removed, what generally rises to the surface are all the feelings that were pacified. And the biggest feeling is a sense of loss. And we hold a loving space and presence, and we allow our child to have the loss, and we sit in empathy. And that's why my program is called Compassionate Sleep Solutions, because the deepest really study and practice of empathy is compassion. And it's when we sit next to another person who has experienced a loss or experiencing difficult, struggling feelings, and we know what that's like as a human. And we sit and we resonate and we mirror and we understand as a human who's experienced loss. And there's nothing we can do about it. We can't fix it for them. We can't, especially if we don't want to be fixing it anymore for our children. If we've decided it's not in their best interest, we sit and we help them process the feelings that pacifier is pacifying. And we allow them their expression, and we sit and empathize. I hear you. I know you want the Passy. That's a good time where we can say, here, you have your stuffy. You can pet your puppy, or you can touch the rabbit ear, or you can hold this and use this. I'd rather those than the sucking of the pacifier.
Our next question, it's two different people have a similar question. And one is a nanny who says, I recommend to parents to help children, and make recommendations to help them learn how to sleep on their own. But sometimes the parents are not ready to do it. How, as a nanny, can I support the parents? And in general, also, there was a question is, how do you help parents understand and respect that sleep to the infant is important? So it's kind of merging two together there.
That's the key. It really is. That covers a broad range of the issue about sleep. I was talking to a colleague about why sleep is so fraught and why it's so difficult. That whenever we decide to allow our children to learn this skill, especially around sleep at night when we're vulnerable, we've had a long day, we're exhausted, we really have the most tendency to go for the quick fix. The more tired and challenged and vulnerable we are, we kind of go for the quick fix. And the quick fix is giving the child what they want. Over time, though, continuing to do that, really around sleep, no one gets what they want or they need. And so this business of sleep, I've learned over the years, is really interesting. Most people don't come to me until they are desperate and they're so exhausted that they have to do something, because we have to confront a lot. We have to confront our own fears, our own insecurities, if we have developmental trauma, that's going to all be confronted. If we have wounds or injuries or any of it, it's all going to be confronted. And that's the hardest part, is us being self-soothed to help our child soothe. So if a parent doesn't really want to or isn't ready, I would back off and just keep meeting them where they are, encouraging them that I really feel like your child's capable of falling asleep. I think this is a great skill to learn. However gently you do that with parents. I really feel for nannies and caregivers, you're dealing with a very delicate parenting issue. So yes, that's it. Some more questions.
Yes, actually, this is a great question. This is from an early childhood program director of a full-day child care program near Boston. Wow. She's been hearing from a lot of parents that since the school closure and the current abnormal situation we all find ourselves in, that there are new abnormal sleeping patterns and that their toddler and preschool children's night sleep has been interrupted. Children who were previously sleeping through the night are now waking up in the middle of the night and calling out for parents or climbing into bed to find parents. Parents are concerned about how best to respond, understanding that children might be anxious, but worrying about setting bad precedents if they let children sleep in the bed at those ages. Looking for any strategies or insight on that.
Oh, wow. That is, that's a big one, because during this time, children are like tuning forks, right, to our emotional, the waves of emotion that we're feeling. They're tuning into us and they can feel it. So I can see a lot of parents right now are responding more in the night. And I would say probably during this time, if a parent suspects that a child is having a little bit of extra anxiety, yes. What I'm recommending for those parents, and also another big disruption that's happening, what I've noticed over the years, that children who go to daycares and preschools, they nap better there than they do at home. So one thing that's getting thrown off is the child was napping every day because it's part of the culture and the teachers are holding the space. It's part of the routine of the day, and they're all napping with their little village, their daytime village, right? So they're coming home and they're not napping as well for parents, and that will interrupt night sleep. So I would encourage parents to really work on the naps. But also the two things that I'm finding right now, get outside as much as possible in the sun, self-soothing activities, a sand table or a little bit of water play. It's starting to get warm around the country. So anytime any of you can get outside in the sun and allow your child these kind of simple, really soothing activities, tactile activities of sand, water, those kinds of experiences. And at night, to create some kind of ritual. I had a family who was having a hard time, and I said, put a quilt out in the backyard and lay and they're practice of either this family has a prayer practice, and send some prayers out to the universe, like you create this beautiful ritual under the stars that to calm the body down and take them outside. They have two rambunctious, rowdy boys, and it changed their night, just having a different ritual. So switching up the ritual, wherever there's starting a habit to form, we have to look at the ritual and create a really beautiful, loving, holding, peaceful, winding down ritual. And if you can do it under the stars, all the better. And then they would come in, and it really helped. So it's a combination of preparing the child, the routine of the day, really getting a routine of the day. Children's routines are off, and that can interrupt night sleep. That's another, we talk about routine so much in RIE, the routine, the dependable, predictable routine of the day. And adding a really sweet, wind down, peaceful, connected ritual that's calming for the parent too, can really, the family, it's like one big parasympathetic nervous system. We have to work on the whole system of the parents, bringing it down a notch at the end of the day so that the children can follow, and we usher them into that beauty of sleep.
Thank you. I think we have another good one here. We have so many wonderful questions.
So many good ones.
So our two sons, ages 2.5 and almost 5, both come out of their rooms in the 5 a.m. hour and wake us up. We've tried implementing a family wake time of 6:30 a.m. But what are your suggestions for realistic age-appropriate expectations about our children in the morning, and how best to implement a family wake-up time? They're very capable of praying independently or together, but they come directly to us. Our older son knows how to open all the doors and gates, but we don't want him letting our younger son out or the dog. We've asked them for ideas and input, but the only thing it sounds like they said is they want the parents to get up earlier. Do you have any other ideas?
Yeah, I was going to say, so how old are they? 5?
5 and about 2 3/4.
2 3/4. So yeah, gates, if the 5-year-old can figure it out, that's it. I would create, when I work with siblings like this, we do a whole family together. We create a play and story scenario to endear them to this. I would recommend looking at a item that I recommend called the door monkey, and you can use it with a gate, and if they open the gate, then the door gets closed with the door monkey. And the door monkey is a child-proof item, and it leaves a gap in the door about that wide. And the door monkey is in place. It's a direct consequence of coming out. So here again, we're presenting sleep in story and play as a loving act, as health and safety, and as respect. So we empathize. I know you want us to wake up, yet we need more sleep. We're going to go back to sleep. What I'd also recommend is an environmental cue, and I incorporate this into the story and play. It's a tot clock or an okay to wake clock, and it's just a light that goes on that says that's the time where we come in and take you out. And we started at 6 and then slowly make it later, so that they have an environmental cue, that they're set up ahead of time for success with an environmental boundary that they don't come out. They don't come out. Now, if the 5-year-old is safe coming out and the 2.5-year-old isn't, then we work on more of the physical environment of possibly until they're sleeping through the night, we separate the children. And it's not as a punishment. It's just a consequence of our sleep being interrupted, the grown-up sleep being interrupted. And so we use it as inspiration. So if they want to share a room together, we just say, okay, this is where we are. It's not working. This is what we're going to do. And until we get to where this is working, where you're respecting sleep and you're waking when the light goes on and not coming out of your room, we're going to separate you and put you in different rooms. And then you use the door monkey for the older child and the gate for the other child. So this would be probably a 2-day preparation of them to give them a new way of doing it that does not wake you up. But I appreciate that they had ideas and that you've involved them in the solution. I would involve them in a bit of a different way, and to where that hard line of, we're staying in our room and we're not getting up with you. And until you can stay in your room, we're going to create it to where you're in this loving container. It's how we present the container. Parents get surprised. One of the biggest surprise parents have is how much children want containers, that they ask for the door monkey. Like night one, they're beating on the door, and night two, where's the door monkey? I want the door monkey. Where's the gate? I want the gate. They actually like the containment. So that's what I would recommend.
Okay. Let's talk, I have another one here. When you talk about compassionate presence at waking times and comforting, such as going in, picking up, and soothing, how do you recommend parents deal with the frequency of such wakings and how to move to the next step of minimizing them over time?
So minimizing them over time is that, going in, that's where we have to allow some struggle. So giving them longer, and it depends on how old the child is. When we get into toddlers, sorry, I'm squirming around because I'm not used to sitting this still for so long. When we're working with toddlers, we start to use the language of, I'm going to give you longer to work this out. I'm going to come and I'm going to support you when you need me. And this is when, around toddlerhood is where we, the parents, start to discern the difference between a need and a want for the child. And that's a lifelong lesson. I still am learning the difference between a need and a want, to tell you the truth. So we're kind of making these decisions for our children for about 16 years, the difference, 18 years really, the difference between a need and a want. So we go to them and we respond to them, but that's when I would recommend, really listening, this listening approach to the cry. So the approach that I give is a responsive approach based on the cries of your child, of what you hear is too much for them to deal with, and allowing struggle. All development, all learning, there is an amount of struggle. And if we have any teachers, I know we have some teachers in the audience, it's called the zone of approximation, right? Where the child is in that zone of the zone of proximal development or something. It has something, approximation, proximal, something, somebody knows what I'm talking, y'all know what I'm talking about. That there's a zone where there's struggle, but not stress. So we don't want them to be so stressed out that no learning happens, but there is a zone where there's just enough struggle that they're learning, and they kind of have to go through that with sleep, that little zone where they're going to struggle, and we come to them when it gets too much for them. And that's when we soothe, so that we become a touchstone rather than the rock that's constantly present, constantly there, with them on us, fixing it all night long, that we become a touchstone. I'm here, I love you, I know, I'm going to give you some time to work it out. I'll be back if you need me, I'm listening. And we come and go. And they do accept that. So if we're staying in that compassionate place of empathizing, and we're staying for 5-10 minutes, and then we leave and they cry, and we come back and we stay for 5-10 minutes, it sets up another ritual. That our fix is our constant presence, and we can become more interruptive than soothing. At about 8 months, our presence can become really interruptive because they want to engage with us. And so when we're away and we're listening, we're giving them a chance to have a break. They're really having a break. They're not in there making up abandonment scenarios. They really aren't. They're in a safe place. They're in their sanctuary. They're in an environment that no sleep happens. I tell parents the only bad thing that ever happens to children in cribs is they don't get what they want. That's like probably the worst thing that happens to all our children. I mean, they They can bump their lip and they can bump their head. And when they're learning to fall and ride bikes, they scrape their knees. Those are uncomfortable things that happen in the falling. I used to say there's no blood in this falling, but one little girl did bump her lip one night and there was blood. So, but that's one in 17 years. There's usually no blood in this falling. But it does give them a chance. They know where they are. They know that we always come back. And so we give them a little longer to work it out based on
Right. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt there. So this is our final question.
Okay.
And it is on the basics of the sleep practices with a newborn so that you start off moving in a compassionate sleep practice right from the beginning.
The newborn sleep. So the most important thing we're doing with the newborn, it is that time in our child's life where we are enmeshed. We're enmeshed. The sleeping, the feeding, the caregiving routine, it's just all intertwined. So for newborns, I tell parents, some newborns come into this world and they need to be held more. They need to be held. They need more holding. They need more soothing. They need more physical contact. And they ask for it in their cries. And my bias, my preference is that we meet those and we hold and we hold. But as their little brains develop, every movement they're making, that's why we're so devoted to gross motor development and allowing infants to move freely, because every time they kick, they move, every turn of the head, their brain is organizing, right? So in the beginning, I tell parents, continue to offer your newborn a flat surface to sleep on. Just offer them a flat surface. Even if they fall asleep in your arms, continue to put them down. Every time we're holding the newborn and we lay them down, they get the sensation of falling, but we're holding them because we never drop them into a void. You know, we always are laying them down and they get that physical sensation of held, the flat surface. And we keep offering them that opportunity. At any moment, parents get really surprised when I do work with newborns and I'm working with them. I have a newborn sleep protocol, that getting off to the right start, that parents get really surprised of one day they put them down and they fall asleep. Now for the newborn, it doesn't have to be 100%. So when I start with a 6, 7, 8-month-old, the clearest message to that child is from night one, 100% of their falling at the onset of the night, they're going from sleepy to asleep. Because at that age, if we're sometimes fixing it and sometimes not, it creates intermittency and that increases the crying. With newborns, it's not like that. Their learning happens different. It can happen incrementally. So I say your goal at 4 months is by 5 months, maybe 50% of the sleep that your newborn is doing is going from sleepy to asleep on their own. And it doesn't have to be for all their sleep. So just keep offering them the flat surface to fall and to refall. And even if they fall asleep in your arms, as soon as they fall asleep, put them down, put your hand, offer what I call alternate soothing methods. Alternate soothing methods are all of the ways we create our bond with our infants, with our voice, our touch, our gaze, our holding, our eyes, looking in that breastfeeding relationship, the right eye to right eye gaze. All of this we do as we're soothing on the flat surface. So we soothe them in our arms, but we also start to introduce the infant to being soothed on a flat surface. That can be enough for them to learn as they develop.
Great. Thank you so much, Eileen. I just want to say thank you to you. We've gotten lots of thanks in the chat. And thank you to everybody who attended today. We really appreciate it. I know we couldn't get to all the questions, but we are planning on bringing Eileen back within a month. This is recorded and it'll be up on social media and on YouTube within the next day or so. If you really enjoyed this webinar and want to learn more, obviously, about Eileen's services or RISE classes, and also how to support RISE, a nonprofit organization, I've included some links in the chat. And of course, always feel free to reach out to any of us via email or social media.
Yes, and I'm going to be offering some more opportunities for people. I'm going to be starting a sleep support group where I'm going to be doing some Facebook Live. So please engage with me on Facebook and on Instagram so that I can let you know the happenings that are coming. And when we get back together again, Michelle, to do another one of these, we'll let you know. And you can reach me at compassionatesleepsolutions.com, and I would love to hear from you. And I hope to have time to engage with this on the Facebook page. So if your question didn't get answered and you want to ask some questions there, I'm going to try to get there and engage with you there as well on the replay.
Thank you.